This is Shirley with the Southern Gal's Kitchen, and I want to welcome you to today's show. We have a really special show for you today. We're going to make Grandma's traditional Southern pies. We're going to make chess pie, pumpkin pie, and apple pie. And we're going to make a really flaky, buttery crust. And these are good pies to make. People in the South love their chess pies and apple pies and pumpkin pies. So they're good to make around the holidays, and our family likes them. And also, I'm going to show you how to make a crust, but I'm going to make up 4 crusts and I'll wrap them in plastic wrap, put them in the refrigerator, because the holidays are coming up for me in a couple of days, and then I'll just get those out the day before, and I'll make my pies the day before the actual event, because they'll keep overnight. So I'm going to make up 4 crusts today. I'll just make one for you. Then I'll just repeat myself. And I'll have my crust done. If I need sometimes 5 or 6, I'll go ahead and make them all up ahead of time. I don't want to do everything the same day that I'm making the pies. It's too much work. And this needs to refrigerate and be cold anyway. To make our pie, we use 150 grams of flour. And I have my scale here, and I'm going to show you how I weigh that out. And then we use 1/4 teaspoon of salt, which I have here. And we're going to use 8 tablespoons of butter. Use real butter. Cut it in little flat pieces like that. Get it cold. I cut it up. I cut up 4 different sticks and 4 bows for my 4 crusts. They're in the refrigerator. You keep these cold until you get ready to use them. And then we have cold ice water. Somewhere I have, here it is. And I've got water in here with ice in it. You don't use the ice itself, but you just dip the water out. But you want it cold. You want everything cold, because cold pie crust, when you put it in the oven hot, the butter is just going to melt and be greasy. If you put everything in there cold in your crust, you can even refrigerate it before you put it in the oven. We're going to make this crust. We're going to wrap it in plastic wrap, like I said, and refrigerate it probably 30-40 minutes before I actually roll it out and bake it. Might even roll it out and bake it tomorrow. You can do that. Roll it out, and I'm going to Parbake it. And then it's ready for the next day to make my pies. But you can Parbake it the day that you're making your pies too. But anyway, keep everything really, really cold. When you're doing your flour, and I think I've shown this in other videos, but be sure that let me set it over here, that you really fluff your flour up and then just shuffle it into your cup. Now we need 150 grams to make 1 crust. And I recommend making 1 crust. When I try to make 2 at a time, I just have more trouble getting it right. I like just to make 1 at a time. It's easier to mix up. See, I shuffled that in there and leveled it off. It's easier to mix up, and I just have better luck with it, so I like that method. That comes out to 190. So we're going to take some of that out, because we only want 150. That's why I like a scale. I could tell you 1.5 cups, but actually it's going to be more about 1 1/4 cups. 1 1/4 cups would just about do it. If you shuffle your flour in so it's not packed, you're going to have just about the right amount. Okay, 1 1/4 cups. And 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to move my scale because we no longer need that. Get it out of the way. Okay, and what we do, I like to just mix up my flour and my salt, because you don't want that salt. You want that mixed in well with your flour. You don't want a big bite of salt. Just kind of mix it. You can use a whisk if you want to, but just sort of mix it up there. Then we're going to add our butter. Water last. So we're going to put the butter in here. Whole stick. Like I said, that's real butter, not margarine. Margarine's kind of watery for pie crust. And really, they have water. They whip water into butter too. So you have to be careful. The grade of butter you buy, the better off you got to be. But I just buy butter at the normal grocery store. So nothing fancy. I have used grass-fed butter, and I do a lot. I like it, but I use it more with eating. Don't necessarily have to have it for pie dough. Some people like it for that, but I'm okay with this. Just regular kind of butter, but not margarine, even the vegan butters. They tend to be too, I guess they're watery or something for pie dough, and sometimes even for baking, but they're wonderful just to eat, and on some things I do use them, because I do some vegan cooking. when some people in my family have allergies to dairy, so we have to do the when I do pie dough, and they're going to be here, I'll use shortening, butter flavored shortening, and so I'll make some of these pie doughs up with butter flavored shortening for that reason. But this one's going to have real butter because it's going in a chess pie. The chess pie and pumpkin pie, these people wouldn't be able to eat those anyway. You can make a vegan pumpkin pie, but that's not what we're making. We also have some vegan desserts, by the way. But the apple pie, because it doesn't have dairy, I'll make it with butter flavored shortening, and it's a good crust. Nothing wrong with it. It's a very good crust, but I still like my butter crust the absolute best. Okay, and what I'm doing here, I'm going to dump this out so you can see it better. What I'm doing here is taking all those butter pieces and taking my finger and my thumb, and I'm just mashing them into the flour. I've got a lot of it mashed up. You want it about the size of walnut halves, not pea halves. That's too small for what we're wanting to do. A small walnut half is, guess what I'd say. And you can even shuffle it through your fingers. But you want that butter mashed down into the flour. That's kind of the goal here. Put the butter down into the flour. And when you get it about the size of small walnut halves, so you can kind of shuffle it like that and make sure they're mashed down good. You don't want any really dry flour there that doesn't have butter mashed up in it. And you don't want any butter that doesn't have flour in it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. You want both. You want to do both. Then when you get that mixed in, really it's just simple. This takes just a couple of minutes to make a pie crust. It doesn't take very long at all. Just get all your ingredients measured out and you won't have any problem. That's pretty mixed up. Now we're going to add our water, and we're going to add about 1/4 cup. We start slowly because you can always add more, but you sure can't take it out. This is a little less than 1/4, but I'm going to put that in, then I'll add just a little bit more. I don't want my ice in there, so a little more. That's about 1/4. Then we're going to just kind of mix this together before I get my fingers in it. Get that water kind of blended in with that flour. Got my parchment paper down here. I'm going to use that in a minute. But then you just kind of mix this up. You'll say, well, that doesn't look like pie dough. It will. You don't want to overwork your pie dough. It's like biscuit dough. When you start overworking it, it won't be that good. It'll be tough and it just won't be as good. You just want to mix in just enough. You mix it enough just to get it mixed, but yet not over mix it. Not too much water, not too much flour. We got plenty of water in there. We won't need any more, I don't believe. But we'll see here. Now we'll start mashing it together and see it's starting to hold together. It's starting to hold together already. So we just take our fingers, thumb, just mash, or your hand, kind of your fingers, not your hand. And that's coming together really well. This is pretty much foolproof recipe. Flours can vary, how warm your kitchen is. Your butter might start melting. In that case, stick this whole thing in a bag, Ziploc bag, and stick it in the fridge. Get it cold, because if it starts getting soft on you, too soft, it'll make your pie crust really greasy, and you don't want that. Greasy pie dough is not good dough. You want it flaky. You want it good. You want it tender. This feels just right. See how it comes together? That's all you're looking for. At that point, we're ready to go to the next step. I'll show you that in just a second here. Get this pulled together. What we're going to do, we'll take my piece of parchment paper and we'll put this right on it, and I'm going to get all this dumping on there. Get all that goodness off of there. I like to work on that large platter of pie dough. It just makes cleanup really easy. And I'm just going to gently pull this together. It's pretty good just the way it is. It doesn't stick to my hand, and yet it's still moist. There's no big dry pockets or anything. And this is sort of the magic trick. Take your parchment paper and just gently flatten this out. Fold this over and just mash it down with your hand. And you'll do that 4 times on each direction. just kind of gently mashes that butter, pie dough together and makes those flaky, airy, tender crust that you want. About 4 times should do that. That's all there is to it. The pie dough's done. That took me, what, a couple minutes? 2 or 3, I don't know. I didn't count time. It doesn't have to, got some cracks there. As long as they're not real dry, it's okay. If it's real dry, you might want to moisten it, but it's not too dry there. I'm mashing it in my hand just a little bit. You just want to get that flour and that butter mixed together. Then you're going to wrap it and refrigerate it at least 30 minutes. And you can, like I said, you can leave this overnight. If you do, just set it out a few minutes before you start making it. And I'm going to make one more crust, and then I'm going to make some shortening crust for people that can't have the butter. We'll see you later on the next part. Okay, we've got our pie dough. It's been refrigerated. Actually, I refrigerated it for several hours. The butter crust is going to be soft. Now, if you're making one with shortening, it's going to be a little bit firmer. But this one's going to be a little softer, but it's a very flaky crust. That's why it's flaky too. So we're going to roll this out. And I've got a pie plate here that I'm going to use this for my chest pie. And then I have a different one, obviously, for the pumpkin pie. But we're going to Parbake the crust at 425 for, 3 to 5, 6 minutes with the, we'll line it with parchment and beans in it. Beans or pie weights, whichever you want. Then what we want to do is we want to just get that crust set. Then you can take the beans out and bake it another couple minutes. You don't want the crust to brown necessarily, but you want it to get set. Put our parchment and our beans in it and bake it. My oven's already preheated, so it's all ready to go. And I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then I'm going to make my pumpkin pie dough. And I like to Parbake it too. The filling won't soak into the crust and make it soggy. So I'll Parbake it too. The apple pie, not so much. In the skillet, I could Parbake it a little bit. I might actually, but not near. I don't worry about it as much. It's more custard pies, even pumpkin pie, maybe not as bad, but chest pie for sure. And again, when you're rolling out your crust, you want just enough flour, just what you have to have. You don't want to be working flour into that crust. Roll one direction, then roll the other direction. Turn it, roll one direction, and roll the other direction. And we're going to get this, move my flour out of the way a little bit. We're going to get this to, because this is a deep rim pie, and a chest pie is a pretty full pie, a deeper rim, it's going to take way more than just the outside of the rim on the crust. This is actually, my circles here, this is about 12. 12? No, 10. It's 10 inches. So we want this at least, let's say 14 by the time we get down on those edges. So we'll just keep working with it. We don't want it to stick, but we don't want to over flour it either. And we'll just work it out here and get it the size we want it. Then we will make sure it doesn't stick to your board. If it starts sticking, just put a little flour around. Because if it sticks, you won't be able to get it in your pie plate, obviously. But this is really a good crust. It's flaky, it's tender, a little harder to work with. Butter crusts are always a little harder to work with. Kind of like we did the apple dumpling. It's not quite that hard, but not really, I'd say, hard to work with. It just takes a little more patience and time because they are very soft, buttery, flaky crust. I'm trying to get this. I have circles on my mat, so it tells me how big. I'd like to get it as close to 14 as I can and still be able to pick it up, hopefully. That's always a challenge sometimes, to get it from your board into your pie plate. If you get it too thin, that can be an issue. Okay, let's see if this is going to be. That should be big enough to give us a little depth down in there. Maybe just a little more. Put that out of the way. I can get it a little bigger. I want to have a little edge there. Just work with it a little bit more. Then, let's see now. Like I said, you want enough to get down in that depth there. When I do my skillet pie for my apple pie, I actually use 3 pie crusts, or almost 3. I made 3 because that's the one I'm making with the shortening crust. And you can use lard too, but because it's so big and the sides and then the top, I make kind of a rustic apple pie. I'll show you. But I make 3 crusts up, so I have enough crust to compensate for all that. I'm going to see if we can get this onto a rolling pin without tearing it up. It's going to be soft. It's a little tricky, but we can do it. We'll just roll it on here. And we'll see how it fits. Looks like it's going to be about right. We made it. Now don't not level it down in there with your hands. Kind of gently tuck it down in there because it'll shrink up on you, otherwise it won't work right. You want to kind of ease it in there. It's a little shy right here on dough, but it's okay. This is such a pretty bow on the edge. You don't have to worry about making too fancy of an edge on it because it's already pretty. Makes a pretty crust. Okay, I'm going to take just a little bit right here where I got a little piece. I'm going to piece it right in there. You can always piece it together a little bit if you need to. Okay, any crust left over, I'm just going to pull it up, tuck it under. Some of it's not got much to tuck under because there's just not much pie dough there. A deep dish, that's what it's going to be. You're not going to have a lot of room to tuck a lot of edges and make that pretty fancy crimped edge on a deep dish like this. You just don't have enough pie dough. Unless you wanted to make a pie and a half, then you'd probably have enough, a dough and a half, and roll that out. You could do it. But like I said, I'm okay with this. I'll show you what I'm going to do with it. Just turn it under. There's nothing really there to cut off. Some of it's got a little more thickness to it than others places. It's okay. It's all good. Mash it down in there. Mash it under. And what we're going to do with this, since we really can't make a nice crimped edge, we're going to do a fork edge. We'll just kind of do that. And it still makes a pretty edge on it. Some places it's thicker than others, like I said. But it's all good. It'll taste good anyway. All the way around your pie there. Now we're going to dock. Dock means, and that filling will not run through those holes when you dock it. You think, well, it might, but it's going to kind of cook as it bakes. It cooks together. This keeps it from puffing up in the middle and breaking when you put your filling in there to bake. So you want to dock it pretty good. Otherwise, it'll buckle up on you. And be sure you dock the sides. We'll do that too. Then we're going to put our parchment. You can use foil too. It doesn't really matter which you use. Something's kind of messed up there. Do it again. You can use parchment or foil, and then beans. I use beans. Some people use pie weights, but I just have a big jar of beans, and I just use them over and over, and I put them back in the jar after they're cool, and I'll use them for the next pie. So I always have a bean jar. I have a jar with just pie beans in it. I call it pie weights, but it's beans really. Let's see if we're almost around there. Okay. Now we can put our parchment in. Kind of push it down with your hands a little bit. And there's my beans. I use them over and over. And I like to fill it pretty full. That's why I use beans. If you buy pie weights, you'd have to have a lot of pie weights to fill that up. You want that pretty full in there. If you can really see that. Then we're going to bake this off, like I said, 10 or 15 minutes. But really, 7, I'd say I said 10 or 15, that's too long. For parbaking, probably 5 to 7 minutes. And then I'll see how it looks, and then I'll take my beans and this parchment out, and I'll bake it 2 or 3 more minutes. So we'll be back when this gets parbaked, and then we'll be ready to, I'm going to go ahead and roll out one for my pumpkin pie, and I'm going to parbake it. Then I'll come back and show you how to do the fillings. We'll do the apple pie last. We're now ready to make our chess pie. I love chess pie. Chess pie is a really southern dish, and this is a southern chess pie. Some chess pies are sweeter than others. Some have less sugar, more sugar. Some have cornmeal only in the mix, and the cornmeal is what gives that chess pie that crunchy top. And then some have just flour. I use both. I use cornmeal, I use flour. I also use buttermilk as opposed to regular milk, but you can make chess pies, you'll find all kinds of recipes. But chess pie is an amazingly good pie. It's one of my favorites. I just love it. And what I'm doing today, let me give you the ingredients first. I've got 5 eggs, and I've already beat them up. I've got a half a cup of butter. I've got 2 tablespoons of cornmeal, not the kind with baking powder, just plain cornmeal. Got a tablespoon of flour, a teaspoon of vanilla, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 2/3 cup of buttermilk. And everything, the buttermilk's cold, but the eggs I let sit out in room temperature. You know, baking, if you can have things room temperature, you're better. The buttermilk's been out about 30 minutes, so it's good. And I got my Parbaking crust there. It should be kind of, like I said, kind of a golden brown, but you don't want it too brown because it's going to bake in the oven 45 minutes. And I'm going to put this on the rim because that rim's already partially baked. You can use foil strips too, but that'll keep it from getting too dark. But what I did here to cut down on the sugar part, but still be sweet, instead of 2 cups of sugar for my pie, you can do 2 cups of sugar if you want. I did a cup of regular sugar and a cup of alternative. And the alternative wouldn't have the carbs that the regular sugar does. Still going to be plenty sweet, believe me. And it's a sweet pie. That's the way it is. And most of my pies, I'll take the sugar and use half sugar and half of an artificial sweetener. I can't really say brand names on here, but I've got some that I like better than others. But just use what you like. So this is beat up, and we're going to add our butter in here. The butter is already melted and cooled. You don't want hot butter going into those eggs because they'll cook them. And you're not out to cook your eggs. You're just out to mix this up. Let's set that right there. Beat this up a little bit. You don't have to beat it too much. You just want to blend that butter and sugar. You can go ahead and put my sugar in too. And get those blended. Just sort of blend it up there a little bit. And then make kind of a creamy. A chess pie is a really easy pie. Just so simple to mix together and make. It's just takes a couple minutes really. Get your crust done, and this part's easy. That's getting creamy looking. You just want it to get really blended and creamy looking. That sugar kind of blended in there. And you know, I've talked about the sugar. I've never done it, but you probably could make this with all sugar alternatives. It wouldn't be exactly the same because sugar one adds structure, so it might be a little runnier. I don't know. That's why I use half and half. But if you just couldn't have sugar, I'd probably make it with some kind of alternative just so you have it. Now this is sort of a creamy. See how that's a creamy, sort of turning a little bit whitish yellow instead of dark yellow. And that's really all you're looking for. Then we're going to add in our tablespoon of flour. Well, let's put the salt in there next. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Let that really blend it up in there. So it won't have like salty bites. Put in the tablespoon of flour. Blend that in. Put in your 2 tablespoons of cornmeal. Blend that in. And your tablespoon of vanilla. Blend that in. And mix it up. It's just getting creamier and creamier looking. And our 2/3 cup of buttermilk. And I'm going to turn this off because I want all that buttermilk out of there. And I didn't get it all out pouring it. Every bit of that in there. It's just going to make a fluffy mixture. You could almost stir it by hand at this point. You just want that mixed in there is all you're looking for. And see, it's just a creamy, kind of whitish yellow consistency. Make sure everything's blended in good, mixed in good. You want to give it one swirl with the mixer. Just to make sure everything's blended good. Now we're going to take this. And we're going to pour this into here, and we're going to bake it at 350 about 45 minutes. You want your pie to be set, but not so firm that it doesn't still jiggle it a little. And a really good way, what I do is I put a knife in the center. When it comes out clean, it's done. It doesn't have to be 100% clean, but it needs to be pretty clean. You don't want to overbake it, but if you underbake it, it'll be runny when you cut it. So it'll be a soft, very small jiggle, but use the knife test. When it comes out clean, it's done. You do want it done, so it will be set. This is such a good pie. And this pie is really good to make the day before, because while it's good fresh, don't get me wrong, it's awesome. The next day, for some reason, it just tastes amazing. It is so good. And see why I used a deep dish? This is really getting full. If you don't use a deep dish, it's not going to fit. It's going to run over, be a big mess. You don't want that. Now I will set this on a baking sheet before I bake it, but this is so right up to the top, and this is very deep dish. That's what you want. And we're going to make our pumpkin pie, and then our apple skillet pie. We're ready to make our pumpkin pie now. This is what's called a colonial pumpkin pie, which is what my mother called hers. And again, a very old recipe, but this particular one, and it's very similar to the one my mother made, it's by one of my friend's mother, Carol, and her mother. Carol did a cookbook of family recipes years and years and years ago. And this is the recipe that her mother made. So these, again, are all 100-plus-year-old recipes. And I think the old recipes handed down are the best. Now, Carol got from her mother before she passed away, had her sort of come up with a recipe. And I've used this recipe every year. It's really good. And what it has is a small can of pumpkin, just regular plain pumpkin, not pumpkin pie spice, just pumpkin. 4 eggs I've already beaten here. 1 cup of sugar, and I used half artificial sweetener like I did with the chest pie. 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, a pinch of salt, and 1 cup of heated evaporated milk. You heat this up, and then you just let it cool, because you don't want hot put in your eggs. And then, like I said, this is already beat up. I'm going to add our sugar, and then add our salt. I'm going to go ahead and add the cinnamon and let it get, add it and let it get mixed in with the liquid. Turn it off and mix that in a little bit. The cinnamon sort of flew all over the place, didn't it? It didn't fly, just kind of powdery, smoky stuff from it. Not really smoke either, but powdery. Anyway, we want that mixed in there well, so I'll go ahead and put it in. Now I've got, again, my Parbaking pie crust. And again, I've got kind of a deeper dish pie plate because it's Parbaked, because this pie makes a really full pie too. So we're going to add our heated milk, again, heated and cooled. I just heated it up just kind of warm. But supposedly, according to the recipe, it makes your pie set up quicker if you do it that way. So we'll add our milk in here. And our cooled milk. And we're going to add our can of pumpkin. This pie takes 2 minutes or less. I don't know, maybe a minute. Very simple. Just mix everything together. Once you beat your eggs, the rest of it's easy. This is a really good pumpkin pie, like I said. You can add 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg if you want. I usually don't, but I have. I mean, I like it. But I've got some family members that can't have that, so I'm not putting it in there. But you can do that. I've made pumpkin pie with different kinds of spices, but I really like this one because it's not overly spicy, but it's spicy enough. It's good. Okay, I'm just going to mix that in by hand probably. I'll use the mixer just for a second. You can mix it by hand. Just be a little faster with the mixer. All you're doing here is just mixing these ingredients together. So other than beating your eggs, I would beat my eggs with a mixer because while I have made this with just the hand, I used a whisk to whisk up my eggs. But my daughter made pumpkin pie one time, and I gave her the recipe, same one I'm using. She's got this book too. But she didn't beat up her eggs well enough. And when we went to eat it, my granddaughter stuck a fork in the pie and pulled out a whole egg because it had cooked together. She didn't have those eggs beat up well enough. So you do want to beat them up good. Get this mixed. And that's all there is to it. All there is to that. We're going to put it in our pie shell. We're going to bake it, let me see here, about 40 minutes in a 300-degree oven, a slow oven. So 300 degrees. And if it's not done then, and kind of pumpkin pie has to, again, kind of be set. And by the way, that chest pie took more like 55 minutes. So just kind of don't take it out until you can insert that knife in and it comes out clean. As I did at 45, and it really wasn't done good the way I wanted it done. Ready to go in. How easy is that? Get your pie done. You can parbake your pie crust the day before. I've done that before. And it's just really a snap. Put your pies together then. And I usually make my pies, I think most people do, the day before we're actually going to eat them. If it's a big dinner especially, and you've got other big projects to cook, you can get your pie baking out of the way the day before. And that makes it really, really simple too. All right, that is ready to bake. 300 degrees. 40 minutes. And honestly, I think I usually cook it a little bit longer than that. So we'll check it in 40 minutes and we'll see. We've got our pumpkin pie done and our chest pie done. I'm going to make the skillet apple pie. I use an iron skillet. It's about 10 inches or so. It's a pretty good size one. And this is a really old recipe too, out of my friend Carol's cookbook. Her mother, again, before she died, she tried to collect recipes, and that's a really smart thing to do. And she, most people didn't have written recipes back then, a long time ago. And, she tried to encourage her mother to kind of show her how she did it, and she wrote the directions down so we can preserve them. Now, she's going to preserve them in her book, and we're going to preserve them here. And this apple pie I really like, whether I'm making it a pie plate or a skillet. And I like the skillet because it's a little bigger, and everybody in our family loves apple pie. This is the shortening crust because the person that can't have the butter can eat this, and that's why I make it. Not quite as flavorful as the other, but it's a good crust. It's better than bought crust. You take your apples, and I did a 3-pound bag of apples for this skillet. Normally I do 7 to 8 apples. They're Granny Smith apples. Slice them thin. Take your time and slice them thin, because if you don't, they just don't cook up as well. You want them really thin, and just layer in the bottom. This pie is nothing but you layer. You layer everything, but it works. It works really well. I have made it in oblong pans. I've made it in pie pans. You just layer, put a nice layer of apples. And I've got just a little bit of salt here. We'll just sprinkle it a little around. Not too much salt, Now I've got some artificial sweetener here and regular, and this is cane sugar I'm using now. So 1/4 cup, because this is bigger, we're going to use more than 1/4 cup. So I'm going to use 1/4 cup of the cane, because again, this is a bigger pie than normal. And then we use just maybe a tablespoon or so of the sweetener. You could mix them and do half and half. Not a problem at all. 2 tablespoons of flour, and I'm probably putting just a little extra. Again, when I do a bigger pie, I just add a little extra of everything on each layer. That's really about it. 2 tablespoons, and I'll do maybe a 1/2 tablespoon. Just add that extra. You do about 3 layers, and that's all there is to this pie. The hardest part is peeling the apples. It doesn't take much after that. And always put your pies on a sheet tray, a cookie sheet or something, because they will run over in your oven sometimes. And that really protects. And use deep enough pie shells. We're going to fill this really full. So we put the 1/4 cup of sugar. Sprinkle it around. This just gets everything layered with flavor, and that's what you want. About a tablespoon of the artificial. Just to have that little extra. For a 9-inch pie, you would just use the 1/4 cup, and then a pinch of salt. We'll use just a little extra. And then your 2 tablespoons of flour. For a bigger pie, though, I said you're going to have to add a little extra in there. We want some flour. The flour will thicken it up, obviously. And we'll put just a dab more in there. Then we're going to put more apples. I'm going to flatten that out a little bit, even it up. Not flatten it, but just make it even. Be sure we got enough. There's some juice in there, but we don't necessarily need that juice. It'll be juicy enough time they cook out. I like the Granny Smith. A Red Delicious apple is too soft to make a pie. Your apples get too kind of mushy and doesn't make a very good pie, I don't think. You can use any crisp apple. I think I've used Honey Crisp. Can't remember. Normally I just use Granny Smith, so. But any, you can look them up online. Any kind of crisp apple is going to be okay. Now we're going to do our sugar again. Half a cup of sugar. Put that on there and kind of sprinkle everything around. And this just cooks up and just makes the most wonderful pie. Apple pie. It's just, everybody loves it. It's an old recipe, like I said, and those are always the best. But it's interesting the way it layers up and just cooks together. We didn't put in our pinch of salt. And you just get a little more in the final layer, a little more of everything. Half a cup of sugar. I'm going to put a little bit of sweetener. Add the extra. Maybe I'll do half of a fourth a cup. Said probably the best thing it would be to add half and half, but I didn't do it. I'm making this one for some grandkids, and they're going to like it better with just regular sugar. And here we're going to add 2 teaspoons is what it said of cinnamon, and I've got about 3 in here, so I'm just going to sprinkle that around. 2 to, like I said, normal 9-inch pie, 2 would be enough. I'll put just a little extra for this. And then we're going to add some butter and a little bit of water and flour. I'm going to make a very rustic pie here. Make sure your cinnamon's kind of spread around. You want everything kind of spread. This is 2 sticks, by the way, in here. I cut this up the other day, so I'll do about a fourth of it. I'll use a little more than a fourth. I'm going to spread it out. I had it cut up to make some extra pie doughs, and then I ended up making them with the shortening, and so I had some extra butter pats. I'll use them for a holiday with rolls and things like that. It's not going to be a problem. Don't waste not, what not. I don't throw anything away. Just kind of cover the whole pie with your butter sticks. That's about a stick, but again, we got a lot bigger pie here. You don't want it greasy, but you want butter. Then we're going to add 3 tablespoons of water. We'll do, that's going to help thicken it with the flour. We'll do probably closer to 4. 1, just kind of spread them out. 2, 3, 4. Good deal, Lucille. Doesn't that look good? There's nothing better than apple pie. It's delicious. Then I'm going to add the 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We put some on there, so I'm just going to put a little more. Because if it's a 1/4, we're going to use a little extra. Okay, we have our pie dough ready, and I'm going to make a very rustic top. So I'm just going to lay it over and let it just fan over the edges just a little bit. And then what we're going to do is just punch it down right around the sides with my hands, right around the rim. And when that bakes up, it makes a really pretty top. And just sort of pinch your edges down there, make them fit. Now the bottom was Parbaking, but the top doesn't need to be, obviously. So, and that Parbaking just keeps it from getting soggy on the bottom. Then we'll cut some slits in our pie, little air pockets, to make let the steam escape. This makes a really good pie. Then we're going to brush it with a little bit of egg. I beat up 1 egg here. And then I'm going to brush it with some egg. This gives it a nice golden kind of top. I like the egg, and I'll show you what else we're going to do. We're going to make this top really good. It's part of what makes the pie so good. I'm spilling egg on there. We don't need all that. Let me just brush that out. You don't even need the whole egg. Got about half of it's about all I use there. But you want to kind of spread it out. Maybe I didn't have it beat up enough because it's not spreading so good. But it'll be one, it's just a glaze on top. Then we're going to take a coarse sugar, and I'm going to pour this in a bowl because I don't want my eggy hands on there, on that sugar. So what I'm going to use, this coarse sugar makes the top really crunchy. Just sprinkle it on there, and it's just, you've got to do this part because it really does, just makes the pie wonderful. Everybody loves the crunchy top. You can brush a little bit of milk on a pie too and do a crunchy top. But just put in, you know, enough to cover the top of the pie. Just kind of sprinkle it on there. And that's all there is to that. And it will bake up and just be amazing pie. You're going to love it. Love it, love it, love it. And like I said, apple pie is one of my favorite anyway. So I love apple pie. I like to do a crisp apple, like a Granny Smith, or some kind of crisp apple. I like to just layer it so you get layers of flavor. You know, when you're cooking, the more you layer things up, the better flavor you get on each piece. A lot of times people will mix their apples in a bowl with the sugar and all that. But I just think this method of layering with the sugar and a little bit of salt and the flour and things in there, just, I don't know, it works. That's all I know, it works. So I make it this way. And it's a wonderful apple pie. I think your family will enjoy it. Welcome back to the show. I have got my granddaughter here today, and she's going to help me do some testing on the apple pie. She's actually allergic to pumpkins, so she can't have that. And you know, yesterday when I made this apple pie, I said I had a family member that couldn't have butter, and I made the shortening crust. And I know if you watched the show, you saw me put butter on that pie, didn't you? Well, she didn't get to eat it. But she made an apple cake. I'm going to have, not this one. This is one granddaughter. The other one's not coming on camera, but she does a lot of vegan and non-dairy cooking. And I'm going to do some shows with her and let her show you how she made. If you watched my Halloween show, I had the apple cake that my Aunt Mabel made. She made that without the dairy in it, and it's really, really good. So we'll have her make that sometime for us. But anyway, we're here to taste. So we have our apple pie, chess pie, and pumpkin pie. Haley made some whipped cream to go on them. Just whipped up whipped cream with a little bit of sugar in it. And I'm going to let Haley start with the pumpkin. I'm going to take one little bite. Not the pumpkin, the apple. I'm going to take one little bite. I love apple pie. And usually everybody in my family does, except the one that can't have the butter that I put on it.
It's very good.
Just like
Apple pie is always my favorite. I ask Grady to make this for every holiday.
We pretty much have it every holiday, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Apple pies. I use low sugar, as I told you on these, making all these pies.
And some wonderful cinnamon.
Cinnamon, sugar.
Mm-hmm.
What about the crust? Do you like that homemade flaky crust?
I love the homemade flaky crust.
Let's try it and see if it's flaky enough.
Oh, it was very flaky.
I'm going to take a little bite here. And it's very flaky.
Yes.
Remember we put that sugar on it, made it crunchy on the top. Makes it really good. Now Haley's not a big chess pie eater, so I'm going to do the chess pie. I love chess pie. Pumpkin is probably one of my least favorite of the three, but I love chess pie. I love that. And you know, really with the half sugar and half alternative sugar, it's really, I like it better. It's a little too sweet when you put all that sugar in it. This is perfect. Very good.
I think the chess pie is very good, but to me it's kind of like a red wine, and I'm more of a white wine type of girl. So I always go with the apple for every holiday. I could sit here and eat the whole pie by myself. It's that good.
I have made, when all the kids are here, I have made really large, deep skillet. Like that was a regular iron skillet, cast iron. They're a really deep one, and used almost 10 pounds of apples, and it would all be gone when they're all here. So they really do eat them.
It's everybody's favorite.
I like it with this, but more than one piece of pumpkin a year is probably all I want. It's a really good pumpkin pie though.
Granny also makes I can't have nuts, so I can't have pecans, but she makes a pecan pie out of Ritz crackers, and that's pretty good too.
Yeah, you can do an alternative on that for people who can't have nuts. We'll have to make that on the show one day. But the pumpkin pie, you can taste that cinnamon.
Just like in this nice apple pie, the cinnamon. See that color in there?
It makes it good. And the crust on this is that flaky. You can't get that kind of crust out of the box. Flaky, it's tender. So, did we do good?
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was a success. We have one more bite of chest pie. It's delicious.
It is.
Cheers.
Cheers!
Hello, this is Shirlene Sando, and I hope you enjoyed our show today. We certainly enjoyed filming it for you. I hope you'll join us every Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern on Mupo TV. We'd love to have you join us. Hit the like button, like us, and share if you will. We'd love to have you share it with your friends, family, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. We would love to hear from you, and we hope you'll join us every Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central.